Thank you so much. So, hello everyone. My name is P Mirowski, and I'm delighted to be invited to present at the Design Competition Conference. This talk will be about designing artificial intelligence tools for live improvised performance. In other words, illustrating a co-creating process with AI. We have seen many recent examples of interesting co-creation with AI. Kendrick Lamar transformed into figures resembling Will Smith, and others using deepfake AI technology in his music video. ChatGPT was used to co-write South Park. Paul McCartney used AI to extract John Lennon's voice and create a new Beatles song. And director Paul Trillo used Stable Diffusion and Runway ML to create a dreamy short film. Many of these AI tools for creativity are available today in an open source or licensed way. These tools help reduce barriers and allow sharing and remixing to streamline creative processes and to foster creative exchange. These tools are quite capable, but come with serious concerns about bias and ownership, issues I will discuss in this talk. But I would like to make this talk a bit more personal. So I did my PhD in computer science at NYU with one of the founders of deep learning, Professor Yann LeCun. And during the day, I work as a staff research scientist at Google DeepMind. I have worked on reinforcement learning for robotic navigation or weather and climate forecasting. I'm also a theater maker, an improviser, and co-founder and director of theater company Improbotics. In this talk, I argue that an interdisciplinary approach and participatory design for AI are necessary, and that's why we focus on live human performance as a perfect testbed, an example of co-creating with AI. So these are my personal thoughts about co-creating with AI tools. And hello, I'm being interrupted. I'm sorry, I can't. No, thank you. Today, no. Thank you so much. It's wonderful. I've literally been interrupted by the room service. The pleasure of giving a talk from a hotel room. So my personal thoughts and about co-creating with AI tools and for working with a strange partner are the following. We need to balance various desiderata and lessons. And I will start the first lesson, which is a desiderata, which is having an AI as a partner and balancing predictability and surprise. So I mentioned earlier, but I was a theater actor. In particular, I love improvisation, which is theater and comedy performed without a script. Improvisation in jazz music or on the theater stage relies on practice, and performers need to adapt to the changing context of the scene and to listen to and to collaborate with other performers and with the audience. It's a famous yes and principle. And theater practitioners Keith Johnstone and Viola Spolin insisted on spontaneity, meaning that improvisation is always about doing the most obvious thing. And it's when two actors meet, each of them doing the most obvious thing according to the mental model of the context, that interesting narratives emerge. So in light of all this, I had an epiphany. Improvisation and statistical machine learning models have one thing in common. They both consist in predicting and saying the most obvious thing. On the one hand, we have statistical models optimized using maximum likelihood to predict what comes next, like in predictive text, and on the other hand, improvisers also try to make predictions. By making obvious choices, but at the same time by coming from slightly diverging viewpoints, and by trying to resolve their divergences, improv actors manage to surprise themselves. So in 2016, I did the most obvious thing for me, which was to combine programming skills and passion for theater to build a show in which humans improvise on stage with robots. And this picture illustrates the system and the aesthetic of a show, a nerdy and vulnerable clown trying to converse with a toy robot. And so I combined speech synthesis and speech recognition with a chatbot, but I coded myself. And the AI was essentially a neural network trained on the dialogue from 100,000 films, which was enough to cover for the diverse comedic situations. The audience would give suggestions, and I had to adapt and to improvise in response to whatever the AI would say. So I was trying to work with a robot, getting it to tell interesting and comedic stories, which was obviously a hilariously impossible task. The AI at the time would keep generating absurd nonsense, the language model would hallucinate, and my task became to embrace the imperfections and limitations of AI. So I had essentially built a glorified AI version of an exquisite corpse, generating absurd nonsense. It was not the only one to notice this, because there had been a breakthrough in language models in 2015. theater directors and movie directors decided to try this, and often with nonsensical results, like for Beyond the Fence, the musical, or the short movie Sunspring. Those artifacts were made enjoyable because of heavy editing, curation, and interpretation by a large cast of human actors, director, choreographer, who invented meaning and subtext for the AI output. And since then, there has been a marked improvement in the quality of the large language models with the advent of GPT-2, GPT-3. And in all those works, audiences and critics were quick to point out the one unifying characteristic is that the dialogue always seemed to be a bit absurd. And the artist would embrace that limitation. So the second most important aspect of AI as a partner on stage is co-creation. And so we were discussing with Corey Matthewson. During the process of creating my AI for the stage, I met Corey Matthewson, a like-minded researcher in AI and robotics living in Canada, who had the same idea, who had done a show with Chatterbot. And so even though we're living on opposite sides of a pond, we connected, started collaborating, became friends. And you can see his motivation summarized on the stage. He wanted essentially to make sure that there is a symmetrical relationship between the AI and the stage partner, each of them making the other look good. So in 2017, Corey and I performed in a transatlantic artificial intelligence improv comedy show that happened simultaneously in 2 theaters, one in London, one in North America, 8 time zones apart, involving lots of robots and chatbots and tech, and it was an absolute disaster. Speech recognition didn't work, the chatbots were generating nonsense, one of the robots literally crushed and burned on the stage. And the reviewer was unimpressed, and she wrote, "Never work with robots, 2 stars. We give up. Did we give up on the project? Absolutely not. We fixed the many technical processes in the show. We used that opportunity to create as a creative challenge to redesign the show around human AI co-creation, reframing the show as a form of theater performance training. And so despite those initial bad reviews, Corey and I persisted and created a theater company called Improbotics. We noticed that it's the role of a human actor to give meaning to absurd AI text. So in our theater troupe, we decided to perform a live Turing test. It will be no longer robots, but human actors who deliver the AI-generated lines, adding timing, emotion, and subtext, and we called them cyborgs. The audience would need to tell about cyborgs from the other human actors. And we persisted in our initial explorations on human-machine improvisation of chatbots, went from being a human-machine duet featuring physical robots to become a real theater company of several dozens of actors. We let actors with non-technical backgrounds explore the possibilities and constraints of AI systems and develop some intuition about them. And we created this artist-in-the-loop interaction modality. And finally, we published our findings in computer-human interaction journals. As a further axis of investigation, we built better tools for human-computer interaction, including computer vision-based tele-immersive tools for rehearsing and performance in a form of augmented reality. So essentially, people connecting from home during the Zoom pandemic, but being projected into the same shared screen, something that we designed in Touch Designer, way before ahead of Microsoft and Teams and Zoom before they integrated something called Together Mode. We also explored the use of AI-assisted live translation for improvised theater, playing on the stage in different languages and using microphone systems and machine translation to project live translation for the audience and to build scenes that allowed actors to understand each other despite language differences, or also to be comically misunderstood. So we made a good show for the audience with enthusiastic reviews and reviewer scores increasing over time, and I would even like to propose a new metric for AI co-creative systems, the number of stars in film and theater reviews. But now, bringing this back to our work at DeepMind. So Corey and I, both working at DeepMind from now decided to go beyond just making AI outputs funny. Thanks to human partners, we wanted to go beyond that, beyond the capabilities of AI, to increase its coherence. And so this led us to ask 2 questions. 1, how can we generate more coherent stories? And 2, or automated story generation tools, any useful to creative artists? So we employed language models to build a system for writing screenplays and theater scripts and we evaluated them by industry professionals who worked in film and theater, writers, directors, actors, and producers. To build our system, we went back to the classics and built a system loosely inspired by Aristotle's Poetics. We would start with a log line or a short narrative summary and built a system that would interactively generate a title using a large language model. And the writer could, at this point, rewrite everything from scratch and generate a new version. Then the system would generate characters, then plot points and location descriptions that would all meet the specifications in the log line, in addition to causal dependencies that we obtained via prompt chaining. And all of that was interactive with the writer in the loop, making constant changes. And finally, for each scene of a plot outline, the system would generate dialogue satisfying previously generated scene specifications. So this hierarchical generation was designed to try to enable long-term semantic coherence in generated text. We built and tested our system, what we call Dramatron, using DeepMind's language model, Chinchilla, and implemented it in a Google Colab that we shared with the writers. We designed it for interactive co-writing. That process offered writers possibility to edit, rewrite the text at multiple levels, characters, plot, location descriptions, and dialogue. And motivation for us was to have a co-writing experience that's both an engaging and dialogic process. So with the tool ready, we decided to address the second question. Are automated story generation tools like Dramatron useful to creative artists? Or are AI outputs merely mediocre? So we conducted a human-computer interaction study and expert evaluation with the help of 15 industry professionals, playwrights, screenwriters, directors, producers, actors, who had had exposure to AI tools. They interacted with the system and responded to a survey to reflect on their interactive co-authorship session and consider the future use of AI systems like Dramatron. And the 9 questions that we were asked addressed ownership, pride, ease, expression, helpfulness, collaboration, uniqueness, enjoyment, and surprise. So we noticed that film and TV writers accustomed to writers' rooms found the script writing process with AI more collaborative than theater script writers who are used to writing alone. And that suggests that AI-driven tools like Dramatron may offer more or less enjoyable and useful collaborative experiences depending on the professional background of users. And further qualitative evaluation enabled us to reflect on the specific applicability of those tools. On the positive side, participants liked how hierarchical generation could be used for inspiration, word building, getting words on a page, or even having ideas that a human couldn't possibly have. At the same time, on the negative side, participants noted that the tool is essentially producing derivative work based on the data used in training set. It cannot write a complete work on its own, obviously, and it's just relying on predictable tropes. They found that the Dramatron outputs lacked nuance and subtext, that creating theater is not a linear and story-driven process, and that Dramatron is much more formulaic by construction. It may be more suitable to screenplays or maybe even like Netflix. And to further evaluate our model, we invited audiences in. So Dramatron was used to write 4 scripts that were produced and staged at a theater festival, combining a creative team of professional improvisational actors and a theater writer and director. And the comedic premise of the setup was that actors would discover the scripts on the night of a performance. So audiences and reviewers who were aware of Dramatron's involvement provided generally positive feedback. They praised the human actors for adopting the voice of Dramatron and to seamlessly transition to off-script improvisation to the delight of the enthralled audience. So before conducting our study, we identified 3 directly relevant risks and ethical implications. First, bias and offensive language in generated output. Second, automation of creative work, resulting in cannibalizing creative economies. And third, reusing copyrighted data from the training dataset, knowingly and unknowingly. And of course, this was all conducted in 21 and early 22 before ChatGPT was released and the whole ecosystem changed. So at the time, we had a twofold mitigation strategy. We invited the creative human artists into the loop through the co-authorship process, maintaining clarity and transparency on the origin of the progress. And we also allowed Oh, hello, I've been muted. Can you hear me again? Yes.
We can hear you again, sorry. Something
what did you miss?
Just the last 4 seconds.
Oh, fantastic. So basically, I think you didn't miss anything. We have to make sure that artists on the loop, that we are transparent about the AI, and that we just query if the output was not plagiarized. So we're almost done. Essentially, well, I was going to mention the WGA strike, which was a great eye-opener, and I fully support the I'm very happy actually with the resolution of the strike that empowers writers to be in charge. And so on the slide, I summarize that we need to create a responsible creative future together, inviting experts into the design process, being as transparent as possible about the origin of a created work, consider the impact AI has on human culture, make sure that the human creators are in control, and this can be done using establishing a dialogue, and empower artists with a right to refuse to be part of a training data, essentially running on issues of consent and proper compensation, and allowing data ownership. So thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, feel free to write to me or experiment with a collab. I'd like to acknowledge my co-authors and also many people who worked on this. And if there is time, I'm very happy to answer some questions. Thank you.